Russians accidentally poisoned their own forces, and then at the same time, in a single strike, Ukrainians were able to eliminate as little as 550 Russian soldiers. At the same time, in the last couple of days, Ukrainians started to push literally across all of the front lines, and one of the most interesting things recently is that Putin's Doomsday train interior photos have been leaked. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and talk about some ridiculous Russian propaganda. So recently in the internet there was some very secret pictures of Putin's Doomsday train interior, and these pictures have been leaked. The price of this train is estimated to be at 6 billion rubles, which is approximately $67 million, and it has such things as the gym, the conference table which is very long, so Putin is not contaminated by his peasants. Then there's like a beauty salon, which does not look like beauty salon at all. It looks like a place where you maintain the appearance of a robot. And then even a Turkish hammam and sauna. And who knows, maybe he even has a recording studio, but let me tell you what, he most certainly does not have the Russian dude microphone, which I used to record more than 600 videos. But you can win this, and all you need to do is to simply like this video and subscribe to my channel, then also give me a follow on Instagram and read my most recent post for details. The giveaway of my microphone will happen this Saturday, July 8th, so if you want to participate, please hurry. The link to my Instagram is down below. Right, and now let me give you just literally a couple of words about the Western military support to Ukraine, then we'll talk about the West, the South and the East of the country, Ukrainians eliminating 550 Russian soldiers in a single strike, and then Russians accidentally poisoning their own forces. And first of all, Ukraine is expecting the delivery of self-propelled artillery systems called Firtina from Turkey. Then we have a picture of Ukrainians training how to use Caesar howitzers in Denmark. And right here we have the Polish air defense system S-125 Neva, which is already being employed by Ukrainians. And ultimately, we have a very interesting footage from the inside of American Bradley, which is using the anti-tank missile system BGM-71 and successfully eliminating Russian target. The full video, along with unacceptable by YouTube consequences, will be available on my Patreon. The link is down below, and there's still 1 week of free access. But okay, and now as promised, let me give you an update from the south of Ukraine, an extremely massively successful attack by Ukrainians with high casualties on the Russian side, and then we'll move to the east and talk about Russians literally fighting against their own forces. But first of all, unfortunately, we have to make a stop in one of the most western Ukrainian city called Lviv, where recently there has been yet another attack by Russians against the civilian area. There are wounded, injured, and there are casualties. And the best explanation Russians were able to come up with is that it is fault of Ukrainians, because it was Ukrainians who intercepted Russian missile flying somewhere else, and then the debris fell down. So Russians were like, no, it is because you intercepted it, if you didn't do it, it will be everything alright, it will just hit somewhere else. And just overall, in the last day, Ukrainians were able to intercept 7 out of 10 Russian missiles total. Next to go to the south of Ukraine, specifically to the city of Kherson, where volunteers were giving away the humanitarian support to the locals, and later they were attacked by Russians. Our next stop brings us to Antonovsky Bridge, or whatever is left of it, and as you can see from this video, Russians are randomly driving in and out all the way up and then back to this bridge, because they do acknowledge that Ukrainians were able to cross Dnipro river and gain the foothold on the left side of Kherson region. This information has also been confirmed by the report by the Institute for the Study of War. And what I personally understand what is happening is that this is some kind of a collection of the intelligence data. These Russians, they're trying to find where Ukrainians are located, and they cannot do it. Ukrainians start firing at them, and so Russians had to retreat. Our next stop brings us to Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, where in the last couple of days we were, at least for now, able to avoid a nuclear catastrophe, but recently we received these new satellite images which show us the roof of the power unit number 4, and there are some very suspicious and unknown devices. Reportedly by Ukrainians, they are explosives. At the same time, according to the Ukrainian intelligence, Russians right now are building firing positions around the territory of this nuclear power plant, and even reportedly they want to do some kind of test with the nuclear reactor number 4, which is called something like hot shutdown. I'm not a nuclear physicist, so please, if you know what it means, let us all know in the comments. Next we go to Kryvyi Rog, which is still experiencing the consequences of Kakhovka Dam destruction, which happened several weeks ago. And according to the local authorities, the water reserves inside the city are critically low. And then, as we go back to Ukrainian front lines in Zaporozhye, allegedly a Russian camouflaged firing position has been destroyed by Ukrainian artillery in Priyutne. But the most important information that we received only recently is that, if you remember, several weeks ago Ukrainians were able to destroy a huge warehouse and transportational hub of Russians located in Rykove, which is, as you can see, relatively far from the front lines, so they definitely had to use long-range missiles. And so, long story short, apparently approximately 550 Russian soldiers were eliminated by Ukrainians in this single strike. This place, besides having one of the biggest warehouses of ammunition of Russians in the south of Ukraine, it has been a very important transportational hub between Crimean Peninsula and Kherson region. Basically, this is where trains were stopping, going between these two regions. And apparently, Russians did not even expect an attack so far behind the front lines. That is why there was such a big concentration of their forces. And so only until recently they were still loading these bodies and pretty much bringing them back to home. And so that is how we received this new number of 550. And just once again, to show the power of the Western military equipment, right here is the video showing the destructive force of HIMARS system. And just overall, in the last several days, Ukrainians were able to advance as much as 7.5 kilometers towards the directions of Melitopol and Berdyansk, mainly in these locations. Right, and now as promised, let's talk about the situation in the east and this pretty unfortunate event for the Russian forces involving some chemicals. But first of all, we have to make a stop on the northern border between Ukraine and Belarus, and according to Serhiy Naev, he increased the presence of Ukrainian soldiers on the border between these two countries. The units have also been reportedly switched to a so-called high alarm mode, and most likely this is the response to Wagner being stationed in Belarus. Next we go to the eastern front lines, and first of all, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians and Ukrainians continue their skirmishes along Kupiansk-Svatovo front line, and then there was some intensity next to Kreminna. Going a little bit to the south, Ukrainians were able to destroy a large concentration of Russian forces along with their entrenched positions next to Zolotarivka. As we go closer to Bakhmut, Ukrainians were able to push Russians further away from some key defensive positions in Berkhivka. And just overall, the most intensive fighting right now is happening to the south of Bakhmut, next to Klishchiivka, where Ukrainians, as you can see from this map, were able to push Russians even further away from this settlement. But wait, there is more, because Ukrainian artillery was able to destroy a pretty sizable firing position of Russians located in Zaitsevo. Next we have a video of also Ukrainian artillery destroying one of the most modern battle tank of Russians, T-90. And in the end you will be able to see that the Russian soldier was not that successful at escaping. The full video is on my Patreon, link is down below. And just overall, in the last 24 hours, Ukrainians were able to destroy 4 control points, 1 ammunition warehouse, 8 artillery units, 2 air defense systems, 1 radio station, and 4 enemy radio combat stations of Russians. But it does not end here, because if we go even more to the south, a pretty big oil depot of Russians have been destroyed in Makivka. Yes, the same city where a gigantic warehouse of Russians have been destroyed just yesterday. And just when you thought it was over, this morning there has been yet another strike by Ukrainians against Russian positions in Makivka as well. So as you can see, Ukrainians are pretty much intensifying their attacks against Russian positions on the front lines, and Russians obviously they want to protect themselves. So one of the things they did, if you remember from my yesterday's episode, they started using some chemical weapons in Bakhmut. Well, apparently they did something similar several days or maybe weeks ago in Marinka. But because they did not take into consideration the basic physics and the direction of the wind, all these chemicals, they pretty much went back on their own positions, poisoning the Russian soldiers. And even though reportedly this was not a lethal type of poison, this most certainly immobilized and took out hundreds of Russian soldiers out of potential combat in the near future. So as you can see, besides Ukrainians doing incredible pressure against Russians, which by the way has also been reported by the Institute for the Study of War, in the last several days alone Ukrainians were engaged on at least 5 different front lines, and they were attacking Russian positions across entire front line: Kherson, Zaporozhye, Donetsk and Luhansk. So as you can see, this most certainly affects the morale of the Russian soldiers, and they simply don't know what to do, how to respond, so they have to make sometimes stupid decisions, like shooting chemical weapons against the wind. And this clumsiness of the Russian soldiers, and especially their military commandment, definitely does not improve their chances in winning in this war. Especially when you take into consideration that everyone kinda forgot about Wagner. They all went to Belarus, Prigozhin is laying low, no one knows what he is doing. But there is some information on the internet, either confirmed or still not yet confirmed, maybe these are just the rumors, but it looks like he's planning his next step. And it will not be as friendly towards Putin as probably before. I will collect more information and try to report on this in my tomorrow's video on Friday. If you don't want to miss it, it's going to be a great video. Just please consider subscribing to my channel, it only takes one click. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram if you want to win this microphone. The absolutely best way to support my channel is through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member and unlock some benefits, or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи. Beware, there are scammers in the comments, and see you tomorrow.